I've always had a curious relationship with risk. Growing up, I was the sensible one, the kid who followed all the rules, did well in school, and played it safe. I was never the type to make impulsive decisions. In fact, when I graduated from college with a degree in finance, I couldn't wait to land a stable job with a reliable paycheck. That was the dream, right? Security, predictability, and an easy path to success. It wasn't until I got a taste of the corporate world that I realized how wrong I was about what I wanted. In my first year working as a financial analyst for a large consulting firm, I spent 60-hour weeks behind a desk, crunching numbers and compiling reports that I knew would never see the light of day. The work was fine, but the environment was stifling. The daily grind, the rigid expectations, the lack of creativity, it was suffocating. I started questioning my purpose. The tipping point came one night in 2017. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet, completely exhausted, when I received a text message from a friend who had just started his own e-commerce business. He was making six figures from home selling products on Amazon. I remember feeling a sense of disbelief. How was that even possible? He was in the same position as me just a year ago, working in a corporate job, doing the same thing day in and day out. But somehow, he had found a way to escape the grind and create his own success. I spent the next few weeks diving into everything I could find about online businesses, Amazon FBA, and e-commerce. I devoured podcasts, blog posts, YouTube videos, and online forums. I couldn't get enough. The more I learned, the more I realized that this was the path I needed to take. But there was one problem. I was scared to take the leap. I had a stable job, a steady income, and the security that came with it. I couldn't afford to risk it all, could I? For months, I wrestled with this internal battle. I wanted to quit my job and start my own business, but the fear of failure was paralyzing. What if I lost all my savings? What if my business failed and I ended up with nothing? It felt like the safest choice was to stay in my corporate job, where I was guaranteed a paycheck, even if it meant feeling unfulfilled and stagnant. But something inside me kept pushing me to take the risk. I realized that if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Finally, in the summer of 2018, I made the decision. I put in my 2 weeks' notice and left my job without a clear plan for what came next. I was terrified but exhilarated at the same time. The day I walked out of the office for the last time felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was free to pursue my own path, whatever that meant. The first few months were rough. I had no idea what I was doing. I had zero experience in e-commerce, and I didn't even know how to set up an Amazon seller account. But I refused to give up. I spent countless hours researching, setting up my store, and finding products to sell. It was a lot of trial and error. I made mistakes, tons of them. I ordered products that didn't sell, miscalculated shipping costs, and struggled to navigate the complexities of Amazon's marketplace. There were days when I felt like I was in over my head and wanted to quit. But I kept reminding myself that success wasn't about being perfect. It was about learning and adapting. Around 6 months in, I had my first breakthrough. I found a supplier for a product that I was passionate about, fitness equipment. I had always been into fitness and health, so I figured it would be something I'd enjoy selling. I invested my savings into an initial order of inventory and listed the products on Amazon. To my surprise, the sales started rolling in. It wasn't huge at first, maybe a few dozen items a month, but it was enough to keep me going. The more I learned about marketing, Amazon SEO, and optimizing listings, the better my results became. I reinvested every penny back into the business, scaling it slowly but steadily. By 2019, my Amazon business was generating enough income to cover my living expenses. I was finally making a profit. It was a huge milestone, but I wasn't satisfied. I had a vision of building a brand, not just selling random products. I wanted to create something that people would recognize and trust. So, I pivoted. I rebranded my business, focusing on high-quality, durable fitness products that appealed to serious fitness enthusiasts. I launched a website, expanded into other platforms like eBay and Shopify, and started building an email list. I also launched a social media presence, creating content that resonated with my target audience. I wasn't just selling products, I was creating a community. In early 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting, my business exploded. People were stuck at home, looking for ways to stay fit without going to the gym. Sales for home fitness equipment skyrocketed. I had finally built something that was in demand. I expanded my product line, hired a team to help with customer service and fulfillment, and started automating parts of the business. The growth was overwhelming, but I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. By the end of 2020, I had reached $1 million in revenue. It was surreal. I had gone from being a corporate employee with no entrepreneurial experience to running a successful e-commerce business. The feeling of accomplishment was indescribable. But even then, I knew that I couldn't stop. The e-commerce landscape was constantly changing, and I needed to stay ahead of the curve. In 2021, I took another leap. I launched my own fitness brand, selling a full range of products, from workout gear to supplements. I invested in professional branding and marketing, and I partnered with influencers in the fitness industry to help promote my products. It was a big risk, but it paid off. The brand quickly gained traction, and I expanded into retail partnerships with several major chains. Today, in 2023, my business continues to grow. I've expanded into new markets, hired a full team, and am exploring new product lines. But more than anything, I'm grateful for the journey. I took risks, I made mistakes, and I learned along the way. But I kept going, and that persistence paid off. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be running a multi-million-dollar business, I would have laughed. But here I am. If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone reading this, it's this: don't let fear hold you back. The only way to fail is to never try. You won't have all the answers when you start, but you'll figure it out as you go. Just take that first step. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I've always considered myself a hard worker, but I didn't always know what I wanted to do with my life. Growing up, my family wasn't wealthy, and my parents instilled in me the value of working for everything. I was the first in my family to even attempt college, and I started with a community college before transferring to a larger university. Throughout my education, I had a sense of ambition, but no clear path. It wasn't until a particular moment in my life that things clicked into place. It all started back in 2010. I was in my second year of college, struggling with typical college life problems, student debt, an unfulfilling part-time job, and a constant battle to figure out what the future held. One afternoon, I was sitting in a crowded Starbucks, attempting to finish an assignment, when I overheard a conversation that would change everything. A group of guys at the table next to me were talking about starting a business. They were discussing ideas around app development and online services. Now, I didn't know much about tech at the time, but I knew one thing for sure. The internet was the future, and the way people were connecting with each other was shifting rapidly. This wasn't some pipe dream of maybe in the future. It was happening now. I listened in for a while, and then one of them casually mentioned that they were looking for someone to help with branding and marketing. My ears perked up. I had a background in communications, so marketing seemed like a natural fit. When I left the coffee shop that day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't have the skills that these guys had, but I knew I could contribute something. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I Googled how to start an online business and what skills do I need to learn to become a marketer. I stayed up all night reading blog posts and watching YouTube videos about digital marketing, SEO, and social media strategies. I started to get the sense that this was the direction I needed to go in. The next day, I decided to reach out to one of the guys I'd overheard at Starbucks. His name was Nick, and he was the most vocal about the idea. I sent him an email saying, "Hey, I overheard you talking about your business, and I'm really interested in the marketing side of things. I'd love to chat about how I could help." To my surprise, he replied. We set up a meeting a few days later, and that was the beginning of what would become the craziest few years of my life. Nick and I hit it off right away. I told him about my limited experience in marketing, but how I had a strong willingness to learn. He seemed to appreciate the honesty. We talked for hours about his business, and he explained his vision. He and his partners were building a subscription-based website to connect freelancers with clients in niche industries. The problem they faced, however, was that they didn't have enough exposure and weren't getting the traction they needed. Over the next few months, I worked for free, dedicating as much time as I could while still balancing my classes. I learned the ins and outs of SEO, social media advertising, and content creation. I did everything from writing blog posts to crafting email campaigns and running Facebook ads. The results were slow at first. We barely saw any growth. but I wasn't ready to give up. I knew the only way to succeed was to keep iterating and testing new strategies. I even got up early in the mornings to work on the business before school and stayed up late afterward. Then, one day, after several failed attempts, we had a breakthrough. A blog post I had written went viral. It wasn't some magical, one-in-a-million thing. It was a well-structured piece that addressed a common problem in the freelance world, and the timing was right. People started sharing it, and traffic to the site exploded. That single blog post led to a massive increase in signups for our platform. I can't describe the feeling of seeing that growth in real time. I knew we were on to something big. After that, things started moving fast. The business grew steadily, and I was finally making money. We began expanding the platform, adding more features, and refining the user experience. I had taken on more responsibility, including overseeing the marketing strategy, coordinating with freelancers, and developing partnerships. But even with all this progress, the real game changer came in the form of an acquisition offer. It was the summer of 2014 when we got the email. A large tech company had been watching our progress and was interested in acquiring the platform. At first, we all thought it was a scam, but after some back-and-forth discussions, we realized it was legitimate. We went through months of negotiations, and in the end, we agreed to a deal. I'll never forget the moment when I signed the papers. The offer was worth millions. I had gone from a broke college student with no clear direction to someone who had just been given the opportunity of a lifetime. I didn't immediately cash out. I decided to stay with the company for a couple of years to see how things evolved under new leadership. During that time, I learned even more about scaling a business and managing a large team. But eventually, I knew it was time for me to leave. The itch to start something new was too strong. I'd learned the ropes, and I wanted to apply everything I had gained to my next project. So, I took the plunge and started my own business. This time, it was in the e-commerce space. I had learned about building brands, attracting customers, and scaling a business, and I knew the potential of online retail. I launched my store in 2017, selling custom products for niche markets. The beginning was rocky. It took time to find suppliers, build the website, and figure out the logistics. But I had the knowledge and experience I needed, and after a few years of hard work, my business grew. Fast forward to 2025, and my e-commerce brand is now a multi-million-dollar company, with employees and warehouses in several countries. I've expanded into other markets, and the success I've had is everything I once dreamed of. Looking back, it's wild to think how much has changed. I went from being a college student unsure of my future to an entrepreneur who successfully built 2 businesses. I've faced so many challenges and obstacles, but I always kept moving forward. The key is to learn as much as you can, be willing to work harder than anyone else, and never let fear of failure stop you from trying. You never know where one conversation, one decision, or one blog post could take you. It's funny. I used to think that success was about having a brilliant idea or waiting for the right moment to strike. But in reality, it's about persistence, learning, and putting in the effort day after day. If you want something, you have to go after it, and you have to be willing to hustle even when the odds aren't in your favor. I'm living proof that it's possible to turn a single conversation into something that changes your life forever. I've always been the kind of person who thought they had their life figured out. I went to college, got a degree in business administration, and found a job at a respectable tech company right out of school. The pay was decent, the benefits were great, and I was doing what I had studied for. I was living the dream, or at least, that's what everyone told me. But inside, something didn't feel right. My 9-to-5 felt like it was draining me. I had that gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. Is this all there is? I watched my friends go off to pursue different careers, some starting their own companies, others traveling the world, and others doing things that made them genuinely happy. I wanted to feel that same passion. One night, while scrolling through Instagram, I saw a post from a friend who had started his own business in digital marketing. He had left his corporate job about a year earlier, and it seemed like his life had completely transformed. He was posting pictures of himself traveling to Bali while his business was thriving. I remember feeling a strange mix of envy and admiration. If he can do it, why can't I? I thought to myself. And that thought lingered in my mind for days. I wasn't one to take risks. I always played it safe. But there was something about this idea of entrepreneurship that was so alluring. So, I started reading books, listening to podcasts, and consuming every bit of content I could find about starting a business. Eventually, I realized that I didn't need a big fancy idea or huge capital to start. I just needed something small to begin with, something I could build from the ground up. That's when I had the idea. I loved cooking and had always received compliments on my meals. I thought, what if I could start a small meal prep business? I had seen people on Instagram post about healthy meal plans and recipes, and it was clear that there was a market for it. Plus, it was a perfect fit for me. I loved food, I had some business knowledge, and I already knew how to use social media for marketing. I talked to a few friends about the idea, and while some were supportive, others were skeptical. A meal prep business? How are you going to stand out in a saturated market? They'd ask. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that standing out would be the challenge, but it also felt like the fun part. I decided to go for it. In my first month, I spent almost all my savings buying ingredients, packaging, and setting up a small website. I made everything myself, preparing, packaging, and even delivering the meals to my customers. My first sale came from a friend who had heard about my new venture. It was only one meal, but it felt like a huge victory. Slowly, word started to spread. I began to get more customers, and eventually, I was able to hire someone to help with deliveries. But the road to success was not as smooth as I had hoped. I had no idea how much time and effort it would take to juggle the day-to-day operations of a business. I found myself working 16-hour days. During the week, I would still go to my full-time job while managing the meal prep business on the side. Weekends were filled with shopping for ingredients, prepping meals, packaging, and delivering. There were nights I cried, wondering if it was all worth it. Then came the turning point. About 6 months into running the business, I ran into a massive problem. I had zero systems in place. I was doing everything manually, tracking orders in a notebook, responding to inquiries over text, and manually calculating profits. I quickly realized that I wasn't running a business, I was working a job for myself. I was burned out, overwhelmed, and frustrated. I almost gave up. I had a few sleepless nights where I thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But there was a tiny voice inside me that wouldn't let me quit. So, I took a step back and started learning about business systems, automation, and streamlining operations. I invested in a proper accounting tool, started using an automated email system, and set up an inventory management tool. The difference was night and day. Suddenly, I wasn't bogged down by the small tasks. I had more time to focus on growing the business. Within a year, the business started picking up more momentum. I wasn't just serving friends and family anymore. I was gaining clients through word of mouth, social media, and referrals. I invested in paid ads, which led to more leads. I hired a small team to help with kitchen operations and customer service. I also started offering a subscription service for customers, which provided consistent revenue and improved customer retention. 2 years in, I decided to take the leap and quit my full-time job. The decision was terrifying. I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was making enough to survive and reinvest into the business. Plus, I had a growing team and loyal customers. But the thought of leaving the stability of a steady paycheck made me hesitate. Eventually, I decided to trust myself and go all in. Leaving the security of a 9-to-5 job was the scariest thing I've ever done. But it forced me to level up. I focused all my energy on the meal prep business, improving the customer experience, launching new products, and building a stronger brand. The first few months after quitting were tough. There were growing pains, and I still made plenty of mistakes, but eventually it started paying off. 3 years after I started my business, I was able to turn it into a full-fledged brand with a significant online presence. My team expanded, I moved into a larger commercial kitchen space, and I started offering nationwide shipping. We gained recognition from food bloggers and influencers, and the business was finally becoming the dream I had envisioned. Looking back on it all, I realized that the key to success wasn't being the smartest or having the most money, it was perseverance. There were so many moments I doubted myself and thought I wasn't good enough to make it as an entrepreneur. But the one thing I never gave up on was my vision. I kept showing up, even on the days I wanted to quit. I don't know what the future holds for my business, but I'm proud of how far I've come. If I could give any advice to someone starting out, it would be this: start small, learn along the way, and never stop believing in yourself. Success doesn't come overnight, but it's so worth it when you finally reach your goals. When I started my business, I never expected to be telling a story like this. The journey was long, and it was filled with challenges that almost made me give up multiple times. But now, when I look back, I realize that every obstacle was a lesson, and it led me to the success I have today. I was 24 when I first had the idea. I had just graduated from college with a business degree, and like many of my peers, I was drowning in student loan debt. I had a job that barely paid the bills, and I could feel the weight of the future pressing on my chest. The idea for the business came to me during a random conversation with a friend at a bar. We were talking about how hard it was to get quality coffee in our area, especially if you didn't have time to sit down in a cafe. I was already a huge coffee fan, so I was immediately intrigued. The conversation sparked something in me. I started researching the idea of a mobile coffee business. At first, I thought it was going to be an easy venture. Just buy a truck, fill it with coffee equipment, and park it in busy areas. Simple, right? Well, nothing in life is simple, and this was no exception. I didn't have the capital to get started. I remember going to my parents to ask if they could help fund my idea, but they just shook their heads. You need to be realistic, son. It's a lot of money, and it's not guaranteed to work out. That was hard to hear, but I understood their concerns. They weren't trying to discourage me, but they wanted me to be practical. So, I had to get creative. I started saving every penny I could from my day job, cutting down on unnecessary expenses, and living as frugally as possible. I also began reaching out to potential investors, but no one seemed interested. My pitch wasn't refined enough, and I lacked credibility. Every no felt like a punch to the gut. But I refused to give up. I believed in my idea and in myself. Finally, I was able to secure a small loan from a local bank. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me started. I found a used coffee truck that was in decent shape, and I invested in some high-quality coffee machines and equipment. I spent weeks perfecting my recipes, making sure the coffee was exceptional, and testing it on anyone who would let me. By the time I was ready to launch, I had a product that I was genuinely proud of. The first day was a disaster. I parked the truck in a busy part of the city, thinking I would be flooded with customers. I had everything set up, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air, and I waited, and waited, and waited. No one came. After a few hours, I started to feel humiliated. What had I missed? Why weren't people stopping? I felt like I had just wasted all my savings and put everything I had into something that was doomed to fail. But instead of packing up and going home, I decided to change tactics. I started handing out free samples, talking to people, and explaining what I was offering. Slowly but surely, customers started to trickle in. The first person who bought a cup of coffee made me feel like I was on top of the world. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that the idea had potential. Over the next few months, I kept improving the service and the product. I worked long hours, often starting before sunrise and not finishing until late in the evening. I had no employees, no help, just me, the truck, and my determination. But with every passing day, I gained more customers. Word spread quickly, and I started getting repeat customers who became loyal to my brand. I knew that this business was more than just a truck selling coffee. It was a community. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when I realized that I could market my business through social media. I had never been great at tech stuff, but I knew I had to learn. I started posting pictures of my coffee creations, customer testimonials, and behind-the-scenes looks at the truck. Slowly, my Instagram following grew, and with it came more customers. The power of social media was undeniable, and it helped me connect with people who would have never known about my business otherwise. However, as my customer base grew, so did the pressure. I needed to hire employees, and I had to figure out how to scale the business. I rented a small space to store extra equipment and started offering catering services for corporate events and parties. This was when things really began to take off. People loved having fresh, high-quality coffee at their events, and my reputation spread. I was no longer just a small mobile coffee truck. I was a legitimate brand. But just as I thought I had things figured out, disaster struck. I woke up one morning to find that my truck had been vandalized overnight. The windows were smashed, and the equipment inside was destroyed. I was devastated. My truck was my lifeline, and without it, my business was dead in the water. I had no idea what to do, but I didn't let it break me. I immediately filed a police report and contacted my insurance company, but I also knew that I couldn't just wait for things to get fixed. I needed to keep the momentum going. I found a temporary location to set up shop and continued serving coffee while I worked on repairs. It was a tough time, but it taught me the importance of resilience. The support I received from my customers during this period was incredible. They showed up every day, bought coffee, and even helped clean up the truck when it was repaired. That's when I truly realized how much people cared about what I was doing. After the truck was repaired, I invested in security measures to prevent future incidents. I also expanded my business by adding more trucks and hiring a team of passionate coffee lovers who believed in my vision. Today, I have 5 trucks running in different parts of the city, and I've even opened a brick-and-mortar cafe. My brand is recognized, and I'm proud of what I've built. But the road to success was not easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I thought about quitting. However, I learned that the key to entrepreneurship is persistence. There will always be obstacles, but they don't define you. What defines you is how you rise after falling. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Keep going, even when it feels impossible. Trust in your vision, learn from your mistakes, and never forget why you started in the first place. Success is not about avoiding failure. It's about how you handle it. And remember, sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that lead to the greatest rewards. This journey has changed my life, and I hope my story helps someone else realize that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it. If I can do it, so can you. I've always had this vision of doing something big. Growing up, I wasn't the typical kid with a lemonade stand or a side hustle. I didn't sell anything or even think about making money, but I always had ideas. I was constantly coming up with new concepts in my head, whether it was a new gadget, app, or service. The problem was that I never took action on any of these ideas. I thought of myself as more of a dreamer than a doer. Flash forward to 2015, I was 28 years old, working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company. The salary was decent, the benefits were good, and on paper, I was living a pretty stable life. But something was missing. I hated the idea of spending my entire life in the same cubicle, working for someone else's dream. I wanted to create something of my own, something that had meaning, that wasn't just about checking boxes for a corporation. But the fear of failure and the unknown held me back. That all changed one evening when I had a conversation with a friend that I'll never forget. We were having drinks, and I started complaining about my job. She turned to me and said, "You keep talking about what you could do. Why don't you just do it?" It was a simple question, but for some reason, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that I had spent so many years dreaming about what I wanted, but I hadn't taken a single step to make it happen. So, the next day, I made the decision. I was going to start my own business. I didn't know what that business would be, but I knew I couldn't keep waiting around for the perfect moment. There would never be a perfect time. I had to start now. At first, I had no idea where to begin. I didn't have an advanced business degree or any experience in running a company. But one thing I did know was that I loved technology. I had always been fascinated by how things worked and the impact technology had on our everyday lives. So, I figured I'd start there. After weeks of brainstorming, I came up with an idea that seemed simple enough. A mobile app that helps people track their habits. It wasn't the most revolutionary idea, but I figured it was something that could help people in a real way. I wanted to create a tool that people could use to set goals, track their progress, and build better habits. Something like a personal coach, but right in your pocket. The problem was, I didn't know the first thing about building an app. Sure, I understood the basic tech stuff from my job, but I had never developed anything on my own. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how little I knew. But instead of backing out, I took a different approach. I decided to learn. I spent every free moment I had in the evenings and weekends reading up on app development, watching tutorials, and experimenting with code. I signed up for a few online courses to learn the basics. It was overwhelming at first. I would sit at my desk, staring at a screen, not understanding a single line of code. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself why I was doing this in the first place. I wanted to create something that could change lives, even if it was just a small difference. 6 months into my self-taught journey, I had a basic version of the app. It was crude and certainly not ready for launch, but it worked. I remember showing it to a few friends and getting feedback. The feedback was mixed. Some people loved the concept, while others thought it was too basic. But to me, the important thing was that I had something tangible. It was proof that I could build something from scratch. The next step was to take it to the next level. I needed a professional team to help me fine-tune the app, design a more user-friendly interface, and add more functionality. I didn't have much money saved up, so I took out a personal loan to fund the development. It was terrifying to think about risking that much money, but at the same time, I knew it was now or never. I hired a small team of freelance developers and designers. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this process. It felt incredible to work with people who had the skills I lacked, and the more I learned from them, the more confident I became. We worked long hours, often well into the night, as we refined the app and started testing it with real users. There were still a lot of challenges, bugs to fix, glitches to smooth out, and marketing strategies to figure out, but every small win felt like a victory. In 2017, almost 2 years after I started, we finally had a polished version of the app ready for launch. I had no idea what to expect. Would anyone even care about it? Would it succeed or fail? I spent weeks researching marketing strategies and budgeting for ads. I reached out to influencers in the productivity and wellness space, hoping to gain some traction. I also set up a website, social media accounts, and started building an email list. The launch day was a whirlwind. It was nerve-wracking, exciting, and surreal all at once. The first few days were slow, very slow. We only had a handful of downloads, and the reviews were mixed. It wasn't the overnight success I had dreamed of, but I didn't give up. I listened to user feedback and made continuous improvements to the app. I kept working on marketing and expanding our reach. By the end of 2017, things started to pick up. Word of mouth spread, and more people started downloading the app. Slowly but surely, we started getting featured in productivity blogs and tech websites. The downloads grew exponentially, and by mid-2018, the app had hit 100,000 downloads. It wasn't a massive number, but it was enough to validate everything I had worked for. In 2019, we began expanding into new markets and adding premium features to the app. I hired a full-time team to help manage everything, and we launched a subscription service that allowed us to generate a steady stream of income. By 2020, the app had become profitable, and I was able to step away from my full-time job to focus on my business. Fast forward to 2023, and our app is now used by millions of people worldwide. We've added new features, integrated with other platforms, and built a solid community of users who swear by our product. The business has expanded into coaching and content creation, and we've even started offering a physical product line to complement the app. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were times when I thought about giving up. But every setback taught me something valuable. The biggest lesson I've learned is that you don't need to have all the answers to start. You just need to take that first step, no matter how scary it seems. The rest will follow. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There's never a perfect moment. You'll always have doubts, but don't let them stop you. You're capable of more than you think. Take that leap, even if you're scared. It will be worth it in the end. I never thought I would end up where I am now. Growing up, my family was never wealthy. We lived in a small town, and money was always tight. My parents worked hard, but there was never enough to go around. For as long as I can remember, I was told that the key to success was to get good grades, go to a good college, and then work your way up the corporate ladder. It sounded so simple, but deep down, I knew I wanted more. I wanted something bigger, something that wasn't just a paycheck. After high school, I went to a local community college. It wasn't my first choice, but it was what I could afford. At the time, I didn't have a clear vision of what I wanted to do, but I knew I had to figure it out. During my first year, I struggled. I hated sitting in classrooms all day, listening to professors who seemed disconnected from the real world. I felt like I was wasting my time. One night, after a particularly frustrating lecture, I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, thinking about how I could break free from this rut. It was then that I had an epiphany. What if I didn't have to follow the traditional path to success? What if I could build something on my own? The idea of starting a business was scary, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt right. I had no experience, no money, and no network. But I had one thing that kept pushing me forward, a burning desire to make something of myself. I began doing research. I spent countless nights reading articles, watching videos, and listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship. I quickly realized that the road to success was not going to be easy. Most entrepreneurs face failure, struggle with finances, and deal with uncertainty. But I also realized that I didn't have to do it alone. There was a whole world of resources out there, and if I could tap into it, I could make my dreams a reality. I started by finding something I was passionate about. I'd always been interested in technology, and I had a knack for problem solving. It wasn't long before I stumbled across an opportunity. There was a gap in the market for affordable, high-quality tech accessories. Most of the products I found were either too expensive or poorly made. That's when I decided to create my own line of accessories, something that combined quality and affordability. I didn't have any capital to start with, so I took out a small loan and used my savings to get the ball rolling. I spent the next few months learning how to design, source, and manufacture products. I worked tirelessly to find suppliers who could meet my quality standards at a price that would allow me to make a profit. It was a grind, but I was determined. The first few months were rough. I had no marketing experience, so I struggled to get the word out about my products. I tried everything: social media ads, influencer partnerships, email marketing, but nothing seemed to work. My sales were minimal, and I began to doubt myself. I thought about quitting several times, but each time I remembered why I started. I wasn't going to give up that easily. Eventually, I stumbled upon a growth strategy that worked. I started focusing on building relationships with my customers. Instead of just trying to sell them a product, I began engaging with them. I responded to their emails, listened to their feedback, and used their suggestions to improve my products. Slowly but surely, I built a loyal customer base. Word of mouth started to spread, and sales began to increase. As the business grew, I started reinvesting my profits into better marketing strategies. I hired a small team to help with operations, customer service, and content creation. It felt like everything was finally starting to come together. But just as I thought things were going smoothly, I hit a major roadblock. My suppliers couldn't keep up with the demand. This was a pivotal moment in my journey. I could either wait for the suppliers to catch up, or I could take matters into my own hands. I chose the latter. I decided to manufacture my products in-house, which was a huge risk. It meant higher upfront costs, more complexity, and greater responsibility. But it also meant that I had complete control over the quality and production timeline. I found a small warehouse and invested in the equipment I needed to start manufacturing. I also took the time to train my team, ensuring that everyone understood the vision and was committed to making the business a success. There were countless challenges along the way: machine malfunctions, shipping delays, quality control issues, but we pushed through. Slowly, we built a streamlined operation, and the business continued to grow. After a couple of years, I hit a major milestone. My brand was recognized as one of the top tech accessory brands in the industry. We were selling millions of dollars worth of products every year, and my team had expanded to over 50 employees. I was no longer just an entrepreneur. I was the CEO of a thriving business. But despite all the success, I never forgot where I came from. I still made sure to stay connected with my customers and always looked for ways to improve. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From sitting in my car, questioning whether I could make it as an entrepreneur, to leading a successful company, it feels like a dream. But the truth is, none of this would have happened without persistence, hard work, and the willingness to take risks. Every step of the way, I had to make decisions that pushed me out of my comfort zone. There were many times when I felt like giving up, but the desire to build something meaningful kept me going. Now, my company is continuing to expand, and I'm constantly working on new projects and innovations. I've learned so much throughout this journey, and I'm grateful for the lessons along the way. I've realized that success isn't just about money or recognition. It's about creating something that makes a difference in the world and having the freedom to live life on your own terms. I may have started with nothing, but I've built something that's truly mine, and I'm just getting started. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the path to success is rarely a straight line. There will be obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But if you stay focused, embrace the challenges, and keep pushing forward, you can create something incredible. I was never one of those people who was obsessed with the idea of becoming an entrepreneur. Growing up, I thought that working a steady job and climbing the corporate ladder was the path to success. I followed that blueprint, went to college, got a degree, and took a job at a well-known tech company. I did everything that I was supposed to do, but the more I worked in the corporate world, the more I realized I hated it. It wasn't the work itself, it was the rigid structure, the endless meetings, and the complete lack of creative freedom. I would sit at my desk every day, typing away at my computer, knowing that I was contributing to someone else's dream, not my own. It wasn't long before the frustration started eating away at me. I was good at my job, but I wasn't passionate about it. I started wondering if there was more to life than this. One day, I decided to take a step back and really think about what I wanted. I spent hours brainstorming, thinking about my skills, my interests, and what I could do that would give me a sense of purpose. I knew I wasn't alone in feeling unfulfilled, so I decided to take the plunge into the world of entrepreneurship. It felt like a risky move, but at the same time, I knew I would regret it if I didn't at least try. I had no idea where to start. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I didn't have a business background beyond my degree in tech. But one thing I did know was that I loved to create. Whether it was designing new features for the software I worked on or experimenting with cooking new recipes at home, I always had an itch to build something from scratch. That's when it hit me. Why not start a business centered around something I was passionate about? Why not create a platform that helped people learn how to cook healthy meals at home? The idea was simple. I would create a subscription-based meal kit service that provided pre-measured ingredients and easy-to-follow recipes. People could sign up and receive a box of ingredients that would help them cook healthy, delicious meals without all the hassle. The concept wasn't new. There were already companies out there doing similar things, but I saw an opportunity to differentiate myself by focusing on healthy eating and sustainability. I spent months researching, trying to figure out the logistics. I learned about sourcing ingredients, pricing models, packaging, and distribution. I even took a few online courses about starting a food business. But the more I learned, the more I realized how little I actually knew about running a business. I had no experience in marketing, finance, or operations. I started to feel overwhelmed, but I refused to give up. I knew this was what I wanted to do. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of planning, I took the plunge. I quit my corporate job, emptied my savings, and put everything I had into this new venture. I rented a small kitchen space and started developing recipes. I spent countless hours perfecting the meal kits, making sure that the flavors were right and that the ingredients were fresh and high quality. I built a website, set up social media accounts, and began marketing my service to anyone who would listen. The first few months were tough. There were days when I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision. I barely had enough money to cover my expenses, and I was working 16-hour days just to keep things running. I remember feeling completely alone. My friends and family were supportive, but I could tell they didn't fully understand what I was doing. They thought it was a nice hobby, but no one truly believed I could turn it into something successful. But something started to change. Slowly, word of mouth started to spread. I got my first few customers, people who had seen my ads online or heard about me from a friend. At first, it was just a trickle of orders, but as the weeks went on, I began to build a loyal following. People started posting pictures of the meals they cooked with my kits, and they shared their experiences on social media. That was when I knew I was onto something. Despite the small wins, there were still plenty of challenges. One of the biggest issues I faced was managing inventory. I had no system in place for tracking the ingredients I was ordering, and I often found myself running out of stock at the worst possible times. I would scramble to get more supplies, sometimes paying a premium for last-minute orders. There were nights when I stayed up late figuring out how to organize everything, and I still didn't feel like I had it under control. The turning point came when I hired my first employee, a young woman who had experience in the food industry. She helped me streamline operations, from sourcing ingredients to managing orders. She taught me how to properly forecast demand and reduce waste. With her help, I was able to focus more on growing the business rather than putting out fires all the time. Around the same time, I decided to start offering customized meal plans for customers with dietary restrictions. This was a game changer. It opened up a whole new market for my service, and people who had previously been hesitant to try meal kits because of their specific dietary needs suddenly became loyal customers. I also started collaborating with local gyms and fitness influencers, offering exclusive discounts to their followers in exchange for promotion. As the business grew, so did my confidence. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. The orders kept coming in, and I started to hire more employees to help with meal prep and customer service. I invested in better technology to automate the ordering process, which saved me hours every week. I also upgraded my packaging to make it more eco-friendly, which resonated with my customer base who were passionate about sustainability. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We now ship nationwide, and we've expanded into corporate meal plans, providing healthy lunch options for companies. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest brands in the wellness industry, and we've received recognition from major media outlets. Looking back, it's crazy to think how far I've come. I went from feeling lost and stuck in a corporate job to building a business that I'm incredibly proud of. But it wasn't easy. There were many sleepless nights, countless failures, and moments of doubt. However, I kept pushing forward because I believed in the idea and in myself. If I had one piece of advice to give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it would be this: don't wait for everything to be perfect before you take action. I didn't have all the answers when I started, and I still don't, but I kept moving forward, learning from my mistakes, and adapting as I went. The road to success is never straight, but with persistence and passion, it's possible to turn your dream into reality. I grew up in a small, sleepy town where nothing much ever seemed to happen. My parents were teachers, and the only thing I knew growing up was the importance of hard work and discipline. I was never the most academic kid, but I had a knack for figuring things out on my own. I loved building things, creating stuff, and, most importantly, solving problems. Fast forward to when I was 24. I had graduated from college with a degree in marketing, but I was struggling to figure out what to do with my life. I had taken a few marketing jobs after graduation, but they never really clicked with me. I was stuck in this rut, knowing I had more potential but not sure where to focus it. One afternoon, I was sitting at a coffee shop with a friend, talking about how frustrated I was with my job. She was one of the few people who always listened to my endless rants about how I hated working for someone else. She looked at me and said, "You always have these ideas. Why don't you just start something yourself?" It was like a light bulb went off. Why hadn't I thought of that before? I had been toying with the idea of starting my own business for a while, but never took the leap. That conversation changed everything. I had no money saved up, no investors, and no real business experience to speak of, but I knew if I didn't take the plunge now, I never would. So I decided to start a small online business selling custom phone accessories. It seemed like a low-risk way to get my feet wet. I spent every waking hour learning about e-commerce, reading every article, listening to podcasts, and watching YouTube videos about how to launch a business. I was determined to figure this out. I spent the next 2 months creating a website, sourcing products from suppliers, and designing my custom phone cases. I used social media to build awareness, mainly Instagram, since it was such a visual platform. I posted pictures of my designs, and I'd even shoot videos of me creating prototypes, trying to get people engaged. To be honest, I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kept moving forward, making mistakes, and learning from them. My first month in business was rough. I barely made any sales, and I quickly realized that marketing and selling were far more complicated than I had anticipated. The competition in the e-commerce space was fierce, and I wasn't getting the attention I had hoped for. I was about ready to quit, but I remembered the advice I had gotten from my friend. "You always have these ideas. Just keep going." That's when I decided to switch things up. I wasn't getting enough traction on my own, so I reached out to some influencers who had a decent following in the tech space. I offered to send them free samples of my phone cases in exchange for a shout-out on their pages. It wasn't a massive investment, just the cost of a few free products, but it paid off. Some influencers actually responded and shared my products on their profiles, which gave my brand some much-needed visibility. The results were immediate. Sales started trickling in, and I could finally see that I was onto something. I spent even more time refining my marketing strategy, adjusting my social media ads, and analyzing customer behavior. I began creating more content, posting more frequently, and engaging with my audience on a personal level. Slowly but surely, my brand gained momentum. After about 6 months, I realized that this wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was growing into something much bigger. I started hiring freelancers to help me with tasks like website design and customer service, so I could focus more on scaling the business. I reinvested every penny I made back into the company to improve the products, increase inventory, and keep pushing my marketing efforts. Then, one day, I received a message that would change everything. A major retailer wanted to feature my products in their store. I couldn't believe it. This was the big break I had been hoping for. It was a huge opportunity, but it also meant I had to level up my operations. I had to secure larger orders, negotiate better deals with suppliers, and figure out how to scale the business quickly while maintaining the quality that had gotten me here in the first place. I spent the next few months working around the clock. I hired a small team, set up a warehouse for inventory, and negotiated better shipping rates. Every day was a blur of meetings, calls, and decisions. But I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. The retailer launched my products in stores, and within a week, they sold out. It was surreal. After years of struggling and doubting myself, I had finally made it. But that didn't mean I could relax. In fact, it was just the beginning of an entirely new set of challenges. The pressure to keep up with demand was immense, and I had to stay on top of everything, from managing suppliers to handling customer complaints. At this point, I was constantly learning. Some days, I felt like I had everything figured out, and other days, I felt completely lost. But through it all, I kept pushing forward. Every setback was a lesson, and every success was a reminder that I was on the right path. By the time I hit my third year in business, I had expanded my product line to include everything from custom laptop skins to personalized wireless chargers. I was even working on a subscription box model that would deliver exclusive designs to customers every month. My business was growing faster than I had ever imagined, and I was now managing a team of 20 people, all working toward the same goal. It wasn't always easy. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I thought about giving up. But what kept me going was the belief that I could build something bigger than myself, something that could make a real impact. I wanted to create a brand that people loved, not just for the products, but for the story behind it. I had gone from a kid with a dream to a business owner with a growing empire. The journey had been long, full of twists and turns, but it was worth every second. Today, my brand is not just a business, it's a lifestyle. People wear my designs with pride, and I've built a community of passionate customers who genuinely believe in what I'm doing. Looking back, I don't think I would have changed a thing. The sleepless nights, the doubts, the failures, they all played a part in getting me where I am today. And to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, I can only say one thing: just take that first step. The rest will follow. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've always considered myself a pretty average person, certainly not the type to start a business and become successful, let alone make a lot of money. Growing up in a small town, I was more of a follower than a leader, content with blending in. I never really had any standout talent. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. I had a burning desire to escape the typical 9 to 5 grind and do something for myself. What followed was a journey that I still look back on in disbelief. A story of how I went from a broke, overworked employee to running a 6-figure business that's completely changed my life. It all started when I was working as an IT consultant in 2015. The job wasn't bad, but I felt stuck. Every day was the same. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. I was working for someone else's dream, not my own. The company I worked for was well established, but it wasn't exactly innovative. My role was fine, but I didn't feel passionate about it. I wanted to do something that had more purpose, something that would make me feel like I was contributing to the world. One afternoon, I was talking to my cousin who had just started a small online business selling handmade jewelry. She was making decent money from her side hustle, and it sounded like the dream job. Work from home, set your own hours, and be your own boss. She told me about how she had started small, with just a few $100s, and used social media to grow her business. I was intrigued, but didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't see myself as a jewelry maker or someone who could start an online business. But that seed had been planted. A few weeks later, I found myself deep into a rabbit hole of online business forums, YouTube videos, and blogs. I was fascinated by all these stories of people creating successful e-commerce businesses and doing it from the comfort of their homes. It sounded simple. Find a product, set up an online store, market it, and profit. But I quickly realized it wasn't as easy as it sounded. The more I researched, the more questions I had. What products should I sell? How do I source them? How do I even get started? I had no background in business, no marketing experience, and no real capital. But I also realized that no one starts off knowing everything. People learn as they go. One evening, I stumbled upon a video about dropshipping. For those who don't know, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products from a third-party supplier without having to keep inventory. The concept seemed too good to be true. Find a supplier, list their products on your website, and when someone buys something, the supplier ships it directly to the customer. No inventory, no upfront costs, and low risk. It sounded like the perfect way for someone like me to start a business without needing a ton of money. I started researching everything I could about dropshipping. I learned about the platforms, like Shopify, that made setting up an online store relatively easy. I also discovered that successful dropshipping businesses often use Facebook and Instagram ads to drive traffic to their stores. The more I read, the more excited I got. I felt like I had found a way to start my business with minimal risk and investment. But there was still one major problem. I didn't have any money to invest. At the time, I had about $500 saved up, barely enough to pay for a website, let alone run ads. But instead of backing down, I decided to make it work. I pulled together the little savings I had and spent the next few weeks setting up my Shopify store. I spent hours picking out a niche. I eventually settled on home fitness products, researching suppliers, and designing my website. It was an absolute grind, but I loved it. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive with purpose. I knew the real challenge was going to be getting customers. I didn't have any experience in marketing, and I certainly wasn't an expert at running Facebook ads, but I decided to give it a try. I used the $100 I had left to run a small Facebook ad campaign. I'll never forget the feeling of seeing my first sale come through. Someone had bought a set of dumbbells from my store. It was a small win, but it felt huge. The next few months were tough. I didn't make much money, and I spent more on ads than I was earning in sales. But I kept refining my approach. I learned more about Facebook ads and started optimizing my campaigns. I also tested new products, made adjustments to my website, and improved my customer service. Slowly but surely, things began to turn around. By the end of 2017, I was consistently making a few $100s a month in profit. It wasn't much, but it was proof that the model could work. In 2018, I took a risk and invested more money into ads. This time, I saw much bigger returns. I started generating consistent sales and even began outsourcing some of the tasks I was doing, like customer support and order fulfillment, to free up more of my time. I also expanded my product line and started building an email list to nurture repeat customers. The growth was gradual but steady. By the end of 2018, my business was generating over $5,000 a month in revenue. It was far from a fortune, but it was more than I ever thought possible when I first started. By 2019, my business had become my full-time job. I had quit my IT consulting job and was running my e-commerce business from home. I was spending all my time working on it, constantly tweaking my marketing strategies and exploring new ways to scale. My revenue grew even more, and I started outsourcing more tasks, including marketing and inventory management, to build a team. But then came a massive turning point. In early 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic hit, my business exploded. With gyms closing and people stuck at home, the demand for home fitness equipment skyrocketed. I was already in the fitness niche, so I was in the right place at the right time. My sales more than tripled over the next few months, and I was finally seeing the kind of success I had dreamed about. By the end of 2020, I had surpassed $500,000 in revenue. As 2021 rolled around, I knew that I had to capitalize on my success. I started reinvesting more into marketing, expanded my product line even further, and built stronger relationships with my suppliers. I also worked on automating and streamlining as much of the business as possible, from order fulfillment to customer service, to ensure it could scale smoothly. Now, in 2023, my business has reached over $2 million in annual revenue. I've hired a team, expanded into new markets, and even launched my own branded line of products. Looking back, I still can't believe how far I've come. I went from being a guy working a desk job, unsure of how to start a business, to running a multi-million-dollar company. The journey wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way, but I wouldn't change a thing. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that the only way to fail is to never try. It's easy to get caught up in fear and doubt, but if you keep pushing forward and learning from your mistakes, success is possible. I never would have imagined that I'd be here today, but I took the leap, and I've never looked back. If I can do it, so can you. It all started with a simple question that I never thought would lead me down this chaotic, rewarding, and eye-opening path. What if I could sell something that people absolutely couldn't live without, but didn't realize they needed yet? I was 24, working a dead-end job at a corporate call center, surrounded by people who felt like they'd given up on dreaming. I wasn't any different. I'd always been the idea person, constantly coming up with different ways to escape the monotony of office life. But every time I shared my ideas, they were shot down with a smile and a dismissive comment. "Just focus on getting through the day, kid," they'd say, and I'd return to my desk with a sinking feeling that maybe they were right. But one afternoon, while scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled upon a small brand that was selling customizable water bottles. At first glance, it was nothing special. I'd seen them before, but something clicked in my brain. There were thousands of people online promoting things like personalized products, unique accessories, and custom gear. These products weren't just functional, they were expressions of identity. People loved the idea of owning something that set them apart. I wanted a piece of that market. I needed to figure out how to tap into it. I spent hours that night researching. I was up late, so late that I ended up just getting a couple of hours of sleep before heading to my day job. I started toying with ideas for my own product, something that combined utility with personality. I wanted to create a product that people would love to share with their friends and flaunt on social media. I thought about it for days until I finally landed on the idea of custom, eco-friendly reusable straws. I know it sounds a bit odd now, but at the time, sustainability was beginning to trend, and I saw an opportunity. I dove into learning everything I could about reusable straws. I researched materials, designs, and competitors. The market was still growing, but there were only a few players, mostly in the form of stainless steel straws or bamboo straws. What struck me was that nobody was focusing on customization, and nobody was doing anything fun with it. It was just about saving the environment, which, don't get me wrong, was great, but there was no emotional connection to the product. I wanted to change that. A month later, I scraped together all the money I had saved from my corporate job and bought my first batch of silicone reusable straws. I contacted a manufacturer, worked with them to develop a small variety of colors and designs, and even added a feature where customers could personalize their straws with their names, quirky quotes, or fun designs. The idea was simple but effective. Take something people already used and turn it into something that felt special and personal. The first batch arrived, and I was ecstatic. It felt like I was holding a piece of my dream in my hands. I quickly set up a website, nothing fancy, just a simple Shopify store. But I made sure it was clean and easy to navigate. I created Instagram and Facebook pages, started posting fun content, and engaged with the few people who followed me. I also spent hours creating promotional material, including quirky and visually appealing photos, because I knew social media was the key to getting noticed. The first few days were quiet. I didn't expect miracles. I shared the store with my friends and family, but nobody really seemed interested. I wasn't discouraged, though. I knew that every successful business started from humble beginnings. Then, about a week in, I got my first order. It was from a total stranger. I still remember their name, Sarah. I quickly packaged the order with extra care, threw in a handwritten note thanking her for supporting my small business, and shipped it out. That single order was a rush. It felt like validation. But then, something incredible happened. I got another order. And another. Slowly but surely, I started to get a small but steady stream of customers. I was overjoyed, but I also realized that I had to keep up with demand. I started running Facebook ads and reaching out to influencers in the sustainability space to help get the word out. Things started to pick up. By month 3, I had a consistent stream of orders. The business wasn't yet profitable, but I was able to cover the cost of my initial investment and pay myself a small wage. I took every bit of profit and reinvested it into growing the brand. I upgraded my website, bought better quality product photography, and worked on adding new designs. Around 6 months in, I started receiving messages from customers saying they had been showing off their personalized straws to their friends, and some of their friends wanted to buy them too. I hadn't realized how much word of mouth would play into the growth of my business. The thing I had underestimated was the power of Instagrammable products. People loved to share what they bought, and I had tapped into that. But then, the real turning point came. One day, I got a message from a big eco-friendly influencer on YouTube. She had a large following and loved what I was doing with my straws. She wanted to feature my product in one of her videos. I couldn't believe it. This was the kind of exposure I had only dreamed of. I sent her a batch of my best-selling straws, and within a week, her video went live. The results were immediate and overwhelming. My website traffic surged. My Instagram follower count shot up. Orders started flooding in. It was the break I had been waiting for. From there, things only got bigger. I hired my first employee, a marketing expert who helped me scale my social media presence and work with more influencers. We streamlined the ordering process, improved our customer service, and even launched a subscription box for custom straws. I was no longer just running a small operation in my bedroom. I had a team and real customers who trusted my brand. Looking back, it's crazy how much my life has changed in just a few years. I went from working a corporate job I hated to running a thriving business that's now generating over 6 figures annually. I'm not going to lie, it hasn't been easy. There were times when I thought I'd have to throw in the towel. The early days were filled with uncertainty, fear of failure, and imposter syndrome. But I pushed through, and now I can say with confidence that I've built something meaningful. So, if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this: don't let your dreams be stifled by the real-world mentality. The world needs new ideas, new voices, and new solutions. Your dream might be just an idea today, but if you put in the work, stay focused, and keep learning, you can build something bigger than you ever imagined. In the end, it wasn't just about selling a product. It was about building a brand, creating a community, and making people feel something with every purchase. It's been one of the hardest, most rewarding journeys of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. In 2016, I was at a crossroads in my life. I had spent the last few years working as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing agency. It was a solid job with decent pay, but it felt like I was just going through the motions. I wasn't passionate about the work, and I could feel myself slowly losing interest. I started thinking about what I could do outside of my 9-to-5 job, something that would challenge me, something that would ignite the passion I once had for design. That's when I had an idea. I was sitting in a coffee shop one afternoon, staring at my laptop screen, when I noticed a young woman next to me struggling to make her laptop stand on a stack of books. She had a fancy laptop, but no way to elevate it to a comfortable position. I had seen similar setups before, people improvising with random objects like cardboard boxes, old shoe boxes, or books. It hit me. Why wasn't there a stylish, functional, and affordable laptop stand on the market? Something that could help people work ergonomically, without compromising the aesthetic of their workspace. It was an aha moment. I spent the next few weeks researching. There were plenty of laptop stands available, but they were either too bulky, too expensive, or too ugly. I felt like there was a huge gap in the market for a product that was both sleek and affordable. I decided that I wanted to create something minimalistic, functional, and stylish. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined. At the time, I didn't have the first clue about how to create a physical product. I was a graphic designer, not an engineer or product developer. But I was passionate about this idea, and I was willing to learn. I began researching how products are designed, sourced, and manufactured. I went down a rabbit hole of YouTube tutorials, blog posts, and design articles. I started sketching ideas, figuring out what materials would work best, and how I could make the stand lightweight yet sturdy. The first step was to find a manufacturer. I spent hours on Alibaba, reaching out to suppliers and manufacturers. After several weeks of back and forth, I finally found a factory in China that seemed like a good fit. I placed a small order of 100 units, which cost me most of my savings. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and fear. What if the product was a flop? What if I couldn't sell enough to cover the costs? It was a huge risk, but I was committed to seeing it through. When the first batch of stands arrived, I was both thrilled and nervous. The stands looked amazing. They were sleek, functional, and exactly what I had envisioned. But the real test was whether anyone else would like them. I didn't have a huge budget for marketing, so I relied on social media to promote the product. I created an Instagram page for the brand, posted photos of the stands in different settings, and reached out to influencers in the tech and design communities. It was a slow start. I got a few orders here and there, but nothing that would make me feel like I was on the right path. The breakthrough came when a popular tech blogger reviewed the stand on their site. The blog post went viral, and suddenly, I was flooded with orders. I had no idea how to handle the volume. I was working from my small apartment, packing orders into boxes and shipping them out. At first, it was exciting, but soon, it became overwhelming. I had to move the business out of my apartment and into a small warehouse to keep up with the demand. I hired a few part-time employees to help with the packing and shipping. The business was growing, but I was still doing everything myself: designing, sourcing, packing, marketing. As the business grew, so did the challenges. One of the biggest hurdles was finding a way to scale efficiently. I couldn't keep doing everything myself. I needed to find ways to streamline operations. I invested in better software to manage inventory and orders, which helped a lot. I also decided to expand the product line. Instead of just laptop stands, I began designing desk organizers, phone holders, and other ergonomic accessories. With each new product, my brand started to take shape as a one-stop shop for stylish, functional office products. As sales increased, I realized that the business needed more than just a solid product and good marketing. I needed to build a brand, something people could connect with. I started sharing my personal journey on social media, talking about the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. I showed behind-the-scenes glimpses of the design process, the struggles of running a business, and the little victories. This transparency helped build trust with my customers. They weren't just buying a product, they were supporting a small business and a real person behind it. The growth was exponential. Within a year, I was able to quit my full-time job and focus solely on the business. I had expanded into several retail stores, and my products were being sold on major e-commerce platforms like Amazon and Etsy. I had an employee to handle customer service, another to manage logistics, and I had a team of designers to help develop new products. The business was now officially a success, but the road wasn't without its bumps. I faced countless challenges along the way: supply chain issues, difficult customers, shipping delays, and moments of self-doubt. There were times when I questioned whether I was cut out for entrepreneurship. But through it all, I stayed focused on my vision: to create products that improved people's lives while also making their workspaces more beautiful. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown into a full-fledged brand with a loyal customer base. We've sold over 100,000 units worldwide and have expanded into multiple product categories. The company now generates multiple six figures in revenue, and I've been able to hire a full-time team that shares my vision and values. The most rewarding part of it all is seeing how my products have helped people, whether it's a student who can now study more comfortably or a professional who finally has a desk setup that reflects their personality and work ethic. Looking back, I never imagined I would be where I am today. It all started with a simple idea in a coffee shop, but it took passion, persistence, and countless sleepless nights to get here. If I've learned anything from this journey, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It's about putting in the work, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up, even when it feels impossible. I'll be honest, entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It's hard, stressful, and often feels like an uphill battle. But for me, it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it may never come. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. You never know where your idea might take you. I was 24 years old when I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job and start my own business. I had been working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company for about 2 years, and while it wasn't a terrible job, I felt like I was constantly stuck in a loop of mediocrity. Every day felt the same, every task was predictable, and the growth potential seemed to be capped. I knew I wanted more. I wasn't happy just following a script. I wanted to create something that mattered. But at the time, I had no idea where to start. I had always been passionate about fashion. I remember as a kid, I would spend hours drawing sketches of clothes, imagining designs for different seasons and occasions. It was an obsession. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that I didn't have the skills or resources to pursue a career in the fashion industry. After all, it's such a competitive and exclusive space, right? I didn't think I had what it took. But then, one day, I found myself at a crossroads. I was working late, as usual, and a coworker asked me if I'd ever thought about starting my own business. She was joking, of course, but it got me thinking. What if I did? What if I took a leap and started something that I could truly call my own? I had the passion for fashion, but I didn't want to be a designer. What if I created a brand that was more about the experience of fashion, something that wasn't just about clothes, but about a lifestyle? I spent the next few weeks obsessing over the idea. I was always researching successful fashion brands, reading business books, and watching interviews with entrepreneurs who had started from scratch. But there was one problem. I had zero capital. I didn't have investors, and I didn't have a rich uncle who could bail me out. All I had was a decent savings account, a laptop, and a burning desire to make something happen. I decided to start small. I was going to create an online store that sold fashion accessories, focusing on pieces that were unique but affordable. The goal was to build a brand that could compete with high-end labels without the high-end prices. I knew there was a gap in the market. There were tons of affordable accessories out there, but none of them felt special. Everything was generic, mass-produced. I wanted to change that. So with about $2,000 saved up, I set out to design my first collection. I found a local manufacturer who could produce the accessories at a low cost and worked out a deal with them to create my designs. I spent countless hours designing the logo, creating mock-ups, and setting up a basic website. I learned how to code in my spare time, built a simple but functional site, and launched my store. I named it Verolux, which I thought sounded fancy and sophisticated, something that could rival the big players in the industry. The first month was rough. I barely sold anything, and I had no real marketing budget. My only promotion came from Instagram, where I tried to build a small following by posting photos of my products, sharing behind-the-scenes looks at my process, and collaborating with micro-influencers who had a small but engaged audience. It was slow, but I kept pushing. I knew that persistence was key. At first, I was making just a handful of sales every week. I had to juggle running my business with my full-time job, working late into the night to process orders, handle customer inquiries, and update my social media. It felt overwhelming, but I was determined. Every time I made a sale, I felt a sense of accomplishment that made all the hard work worth it. I was building something from the ground up, and that was more than enough motivation to keep going. But then, about 6 months in, something unexpected happened. One of my Instagram posts got picked up by a fashion blog. They wrote a glowing review about one of my accessories, and overnight, I saw a huge spike in traffic to my website. My sales doubled, then tripled, and by the end of that month, I was finally able to quit my job and focus on Verolux full-time. It wasn't easy, though. I was still operating on a tight budget, and I had to be extremely strategic about every decision I made. Over the next year, the business grew steadily. I expanded my product line to include jewelry, handbags, and a few limited edition collaborations with local artists. I reinvested every penny back into the business, constantly reinvigorating the brand with new designs and ideas. I even hired my first employee, a friend of mine who had a background in graphic design and helped with branding. The real turning point came when I was featured in a major fashion magazine. It was a surreal experience, one that I had never imagined happening so quickly. Suddenly, I had the credibility and visibility to compete with the bigger brands in the industry. Sales soared, and I was able to scale my business in ways I never thought possible. I invested in paid advertising, worked with influencers, and expanded my customer base internationally. I couldn't believe how far I had come in just a couple of years. Today, Verolux is a thriving brand, and I'm proud to say we've been featured in multiple publications, worn by celebrities, and even picked up by some major retailers. But the journey wasn't without its struggles. There were times when I thought about quitting, times when I faced huge financial setbacks, and times when I doubted whether I was making the right choices. But every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wanted to create something that was bigger than myself, something that would impact people's lives in a positive way. Now, when I look back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't just hard work or perseverance. It was the willingness to take risks. It was the willingness to step outside my comfort zone and embrace the unknown. I didn't have all the answers, but I kept moving forward anyway. I learned from my mistakes and celebrated my wins, no matter how small. And most importantly, I never lost sight of my passion. Building a business from scratch is never easy, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I wake up every day excited to work on something that I love, and I'm proud of what Verolux has become. I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of countless hours of hard work, dedication, and the belief that if you stick with something long enough, the universe will start to reward you. I was 22, fresh out of college, and had no idea what I was doing with my life. All I knew was that I didn't want to work for someone else, sitting in a cubicle 9 hours a day. The idea of climbing a corporate ladder didn't excite me. It seemed like a grind with no real end. So, I decided to go for it. I decided to start my own business, even though I had no experience in running one. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where the idea of entrepreneurship was foreign to most people. It wasn't that the town was unsupportive, but the notion of making it big through your own ventures just didn't seem realistic to anyone. Everyone around me worked regular jobs: teachers, farmers, factory workers. There was comfort in knowing what your next paycheck would be, and the idea of taking risks was something most people just couldn't wrap their heads around. I was a huge fan of technology, gadgets, and apps. My friends used to joke that I could fix anything with a quick Google search, and I had an obsession with finding new ways to improve everyday life through tech. I wasn't necessarily a techie in the traditional sense, but I understood the potential of how technology could make life easier, and I figured that could be my starting point. One evening, I was scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled upon a post about how small businesses were using digital tools to grow their reach and efficiency. It struck me. Why not create a business that helps other small businesses navigate this confusing digital world? Most small business owners didn't have the time or the know-how to build a website or use social media effectively. There was a gap in the market, and I decided to fill it. But here's the thing. I didn't have any money to get started. I had a small savings account, enough to survive for a few months, but that was it. So, I started brainstorming ways I could launch this business without any capital. The first thing I did was create a website, but I wasn't about to hire a designer. I watched hours of YouTube videos on website design and development. I learned the basics of HTML, CSS, and WordPress. It was painful at first, and it took me a while to get my website looking halfway decent. But I had a product to offer, and I believed that with a little bit of effort, I could make it work. Next, I used social media to spread the word about my business. I didn't have the luxury of spending money on ads, so I reached out to local businesses, offering them a free consultation in exchange for the opportunity to help them build their online presence. My pitch was simple. I can help your business grow online. Let's set up a website, get you active on social media, and increase your visibility. If you like what I do, then we'll talk about a more permanent relationship. The first couple of clients I landed were small local businesses, mom-and-pop shops that were barely online. One was a local bakery, the other a small home improvement company. They were skeptical at first, but once they saw the changes I made, their attitudes shifted. I helped them set up basic websites and optimize their social media accounts. I didn't charge them much, but it was enough to cover my expenses for the month. Within a few months, things started to snowball. Word of mouth spread, and more local businesses began reaching out to me. They'd seen the improvements I made for others, and they wanted in on it too. As my client base grew, so did my knowledge and skill set. I was learning more about digital marketing, SEO, and analytics, and soon I realized that I was offering more than just websites. I was helping these businesses create sustainable growth. But despite my growing success, there were moments when I felt like giving up. I still didn't have much money, and I was often working 16-hour days just to keep things running. I remember one week in particular where I had just finished a major project for a client and was waiting to get paid. I was broke, barely scraping by, and it seemed like no matter how much I worked, I was stuck. Then, on the verge of burnout, I got a message from a larger company. They had seen my work with small businesses in the area and were impressed. They wanted to hire me to build their entire online marketing strategy, from the website to social media to email campaigns. The project was huge, and it paid more than anything I had ever done. This was my big break. The client was a game changer. Not only did it provide me with a much-needed cash injection, but it also gave me credibility. The larger businesses started calling, and I was able to hire a small team to help manage the growing number of clients. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a full-fledged digital marketing agency. We've worked with over 200 businesses, ranging from local mom-and-pop shops to large corporations. I've built a team of talented individuals, each bringing their unique skills to the table. And, most importantly, I've created a business that gives me the freedom I always wanted. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I thought about quitting. But looking back, I realized that those struggles were the stepping stones to where I am now. There are days when I still can't believe it. I'm living proof that with hard work, determination, and a bit of luck, anything is possible. The thing that kept me going through all the tough times was the belief that what I was doing mattered. I wasn't just building websites. I was helping people turn their dreams into reality. And that's what made all the long nights and early mornings worth it. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Just start. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Don't wait for the right moment. The moment is now. Learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. Every failure is a lesson that brings you closer to success. And when you feel like giving up, remember why you started in the first place. That passion, that drive, is what will get you through the tough times. The road won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Trust me, if I can do it, so can you. In 2017, I found myself stuck in a job I hated. I was working as a middle manager at a corporate marketing firm, where I spent my days doing what I considered meaningless tasks. Despite my relatively decent pay and stable job, I knew that I wasn't truly living up to my potential. I'd been daydreaming about starting my own business for years, but I was always held back by fear and self-doubt. My friends and family all thought I was crazy to leave a well-paying job for an uncertain future. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living for someone else's dreams. I needed to take a chance on mine. It all started one day when I was walking out of work, feeling completely drained, when I passed by a small coffee shop that had recently opened. As I stepped inside to grab my usual afternoon pick-me-up, I noticed something interesting. Most of the products on the shelves were niche and handcrafted items. The coffee beans were organic, the mugs were locally made, and the artwork on the walls was from local artists. It hit me, this coffee shop wasn't just selling drinks. It was selling a unique experience. I realized then that what I had been missing in my life was this, a business that not only created a product but also told a compelling story. I started brainstorming. What could I create that would make a difference in people's lives while still making money? I had a background in marketing, so I knew how important it was to find a unique selling point. I wanted something with mass appeal but that also had a strong emotional connection. After a lot of trial and error, I eventually decided to create a sustainable, eco-friendly product that people could use every day, a reusable water bottle. But it wasn't just any water bottle. It was going to have an innovative design and be made from materials that were both functional and environmentally friendly. The idea was simple enough, but I quickly realized just how difficult it would be to get started. I had no experience designing or manufacturing products, and I certainly didn't have the capital to hire experts. But I was determined, and I knew that I couldn't keep dreaming without taking action. I spent the next few months researching everything I could about product design, materials, and manufacturing processes. I connected with suppliers and designers online and learned how to create prototypes using basic software tools. At the same time, I started building a brand around my vision, something that could stand for quality, sustainability, and practicality. One of the biggest challenges was finding the right manufacturer. I had a small budget, so I couldn't afford to waste money on a manufacturer that couldn't deliver. I spent weeks emailing suppliers, sending them my designs, and waiting for quotes. Every time a quote came back with an outrageous price, I almost gave up. But I kept pushing, knowing that the right supplier was out there somewhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching, I found a supplier that seemed to get what I was trying to do. They were willing to work with a small order and had experience with sustainable materials. After several rounds of negotiation and product tweaking, I had my first batch of bottles, 1,000 units. I still remember the feeling of receiving that first shipment. I was proud, excited, and terrified all at once. I had invested almost all of my savings into this venture, and now it was time to see if it would pay off. The next step was marketing. I didn't have a big budget for advertising, so I had to get creative. I launched a simple website and used social media to start promoting my bottles. I started by reaching out to influencers who cared about sustainability and eco-friendly products. I sent them free samples, hoping they would share their thoughts with their followers. It worked better than I could have imagined. Within a few weeks, I had several influencers posting about my bottles. The orders started coming in, slowly at first, but with each new sale, I gained confidence. I realized that people cared about sustainability, and they were willing to pay for quality products that aligned with their values. But the road was far from easy. As sales grew, so did the pressure. I found myself working late into the night, packing orders, responding to customer inquiries, and managing the financial side of the business. I was still working my corporate job, so my days were split between my job and my startup. There were times when I was physically and mentally exhausted. I remember thinking to myself that if this didn't work out, I might lose everything. But I refused to quit. By 2018, my business had grown significantly. I had a steady stream of orders, and I was making enough money to quit my corporate job. I hired a small team to help with the production and customer service. We expanded our product line to include eco-friendly straws, reusable coffee cups, and other sustainable accessories. The brand continued to grow, and I started seeing my vision come to life in ways I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. People were not just buying a water bottle. They were buying into a lifestyle, one that prioritized sustainability, quality, and responsible consumption. But no success story comes without its challenges. The biggest hurdle I faced was supply chain issues. As we grew, the demand for our products increased, and with that came delays, shipping issues, and quality control problems. There were several occasions when products arrived late or didn't meet our standards, and I had to scramble to resolve customer complaints. It was a painful learning curve, but every time I faced a setback, I used it as an opportunity to improve. I found new suppliers, revamped our quality control process, and implemented more efficient inventory management systems. The other challenge was staying true to the brand's values while growing the business. As we expanded, there were moments when I was tempted to compromise on quality or sustainability to save money. But every time, I reminded myself why I started this business in the first place, to make a positive impact. I knew that if I sacrificed those values for short-term gains, I would lose everything that had made my brand successful in the first place. By 2020, my company was fully established. We had a team of 15 employees, a warehouse to store our products, and a growing customer base that spanned across the globe. I had the freedom to travel, work from home, and live the life I had always dreamed of. But more importantly, I had created something meaningful, a brand that stood for something bigger than just making money. We were making a difference in people's lives by providing them with products that aligned with their values. Today, my business continues to grow, and I'm constantly looking for new ways to innovate and improve. Looking back, I'm grateful for the challenges and obstacles I faced along the way. They shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. I'm not a billionaire, but I've built a company that reflects my values, and I'm living the life I always dreamed of. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes hard work, persistence, and the willingness to take risks. But most importantly, it takes believing in yourself, even when no one else does. I still remember the day it all started. I was just another guy with a dream in a cramped apartment in a city that felt like it was swallowing me whole. I had no money, no connections, and honestly, no real business experience. But I had an idea, and that's something you can't underestimate. I was tired of seeing my friends working jobs they hated, stuck in a loop of 9-to-5 life, and I knew that there had to be a better way. That's when I came up with my first business idea, a way to make quality, affordable home gadgets that actually worked. At the time, I didn't know anything about product design or manufacturing. What I did know, though, was that the market was flooded with overpriced, cheaply made gadgets that broke within months. I could never understand why something as simple as a blender or a vacuum cleaner had to be so expensive and so prone to failure. My thought was, what if I could make one that was built to last, but at a price point that everyday people could actually afford? I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew I had to start somewhere. The first step was figuring out how to create a prototype. I spent weeks researching materials, visiting hardware stores, and talking to anyone who might have an idea. I reached out to engineers, designers, and even some local manufacturers to get some advice. And while most of them laughed at my idea or told me it was impossible, one person took me seriously enough to give me a shot. I managed to scrape together just enough money from odd jobs to get a basic prototype built. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was a far cry from what I had imagined in my head. But it was a start, and that was enough. I was ready to take it to the next level. I'll never forget the first day I tried to sell my product. I had no website, no brand, no marketing skills, nothing. All I had was my prototype and a belief that people would want it. So I did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. I walked door to door, knocking on stores, talking to whoever would listen, hoping that maybe someone would take a chance on me. Most of the time, I was met with rejection. Some people wouldn't even look at my prototype. Others told me I was wasting my time, and a few were just outright rude. It was heartbreaking, but it was also motivating. Each rejection, while crushing, made me more determined. I started learning more about branding, social media, and how to pitch my product. I had no choice. If I wanted to make this work, I had to learn fast. I started building a rudimentary website and spent every free moment I had reaching out to potential customers. I learned how to write compelling emails, how to build a brand identity from scratch, and how to use social media to get the word out. Slowly but surely, people started to notice. At first, it was just a few orders here and there. But that was enough to keep me going. The breakthrough came when I posted a video on Instagram showing how durable my product was. It wasn't fancy, just me dropping it on the floor and using it in ways it was never intended to be used. But it resonated with people. They shared it, commented, and tagged their friends. Sales started to trickle in, and then, suddenly, they started to soar. I'll admit, the early days of the business were rough. I was working 16-hour days, juggling customer service, production, and marketing all by myself. There were times when I thought about giving up. The stress was overwhelming. But each small victory, a happy customer, a viral post, A sale reminded me why I was doing this in the first place. I was building something real, something people needed. As the business grew, so did the challenges. Manufacturing was the next hurdle. At first, I was working with a small factory that could barely meet demand. As orders increased, so did the pressure. There were delays, mistakes, and more sleepless nights than I care to remember. But through it all, I kept my focus on one thing, making sure my customers were happy. If they were happy, they would come back. And they did. Around year 2, the company really started to take off. I had a team now, and we were able to expand our product line. We started creating accessories for our main products, and that opened up even more revenue streams. My once tiny operation was now a full-fledged business. I remember walking into the office one day and seeing my team working together, and it hit me, this was real. I was living the dream. But success brought its own set of problems. As we scaled, we faced new challenges with inventory, logistics, and customer expectations. The growth was thrilling, but also overwhelming. We had to learn how to navigate this new territory, and there were times when it felt like we were drowning in all the new problems that came with success. But we adapted, and over time, we became a well-oiled machine. I remember the first time we hit $1 million in sales. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the numbers, and I couldn't believe it. It felt like a dream. I didn't know how to celebrate, so I just kept working. After all, hitting one milestone only meant there was more work to do to reach the next one. By year 3, we had expanded internationally. Our products were now being sold in multiple countries, and we had a solid online presence. But no matter how big we got, I always tried to remember where I came from. I kept in touch with our customers, listened to their feedback, and continued innovating. The key, I realized, was never getting too comfortable. There was always room for improvement, and the moment you stopped innovating was the moment you started losing. Today, my company is worth millions. We've built a loyal customer base, expanded into new markets, and created a brand that people trust. I never imagined I'd get this far, but it's been an incredible ride. There are days when I look back and wonder how I made it through all the failures, the rejections, the sleepless nights. But when I see the impact my products have had on people's lives, when I hear stories from customers who say how much our gadgets have improved their day-to-day routines, I know it was all worth it. If there's one thing I've learned in this journey, it's that success doesn't come easily. It takes grit, determination, and a willingness to keep going even when everything seems like it's falling apart. You're going to face setbacks, you're going to feel like quitting, and you'll wonder if you're cut out for this. But if you're truly passionate about what you're building and you're willing to put in the work, it can happen. So, to anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't give up. You'll face more challenges than you can count. But if you push through, you'll find your way to success. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I had always dreamed of building something from the ground up, of creating a business that wasn't just about making money, but about leaving a legacy. But, like most things in life, the road to success wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. It all started when I was 22. Fresh out of college with a business degree and an internship at a well-known corporate firm under my belt, I thought I had it all figured out. I was going to climb the corporate ladder, make connections, and eventually get promoted to a position where I could finally call the shots. But as I sat in my cubicle, staring at the clock, I realized I wasn't happy. The daily grind of answering emails, attending pointless meetings, and working on projects that seemed to go nowhere felt like a trap. I started asking myself, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? And the answer, deep down, was a resounding no. One evening, after another grueling day at the office, I came across a post on Reddit about a guy who had started a dropshipping business. The more I read about his journey, the more it sparked something in me. He wasn't rich by traditional standards, but he had built something from nothing, and he was living life on his terms. He worked from home, traveled when he wanted to, and, most importantly, he didn't have a boss telling him what to do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about how I could do something similar. I wasn't even sure what dropshipping was, but I was determined to learn. I spent the next few weeks diving into YouTube videos, blog posts, and forums. I learned about e-commerce platforms, suppliers, and online marketing. It was a steep learning curve, but I was excited. I decided to start small. I didn't have a ton of savings, and I didn't want to risk everything, so I invested a few $1,000s into setting up a website and sourcing products. My plan was simple: create an online store, find a product that people wanted, and sell it at a markup. How hard could it be? Spoiler, It was much harder than I thought. The first few months were brutal. I was working full-time at my corporate job and putting in every spare moment I had into my new business. I was constantly tweaking my website, testing different products, and trying to figure out Facebook ads. The traffic was minimal, and sales were even fewer. I spent hours researching what I was doing wrong, only to discover that my product was overpriced, my ads weren't converting, and my website looked like it was designed in the early 2000s. I remember one night, sitting at my desk in my tiny apartment, staring at my screen. I had spent hundreds of dollars on ads, only to make $30 in sales. I felt like a failure. I thought about quitting, telling myself I wasn't cut out for this. But something in me refused to give up. I had already invested too much time and energy into this to walk away. So I kept pushing. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. I found a product that was gaining traction, a simple but high-quality phone case that people loved. The key was in the marketing. I learned to target the right audience with my ads and optimized my website to convert visitors into customers. My sales didn't explode overnight, but they did grow consistently. Within 6 months, I was making enough money from my business to quit my corporate job. But that wasn't the end. In fact, it was only the beginning. I soon realized that running an online business wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. Sure, I had the freedom to work from home, but I was now responsible for everything: the website, customer service, inventory management, marketing, and taxes. I spent countless hours answering emails from frustrated customers, dealing with returns, and making sure everything ran smoothly. There were days when I questioned whether it was worth it. But every time I thought about going back to my old job, I knew that I couldn't. I was finally in control of my own destiny. Over time, I began to scale the business. I hired a small team to help with customer support, product sourcing, and marketing. I also started experimenting with new products and even expanded into international markets. My revenue grew steadily, and I felt like I was on top of the world. But, as any entrepreneur will tell you, the road to success is rarely straight. There were plenty of bumps along the way. One of the biggest challenges came when I decided to launch a new product line. I had researched the market, found a supplier I trusted, and invested thousands of dollars in inventory. Everything seemed perfect until the product arrived, and I realized there was a defect. The product wasn't up to the standard I had promised my customers. I had to make a decision. Do I sell it anyway and hope for the best, or do I eat the cost and figure out a way to fix the problem? I decided to take the loss. I offered full refunds to customers who had already purchased the defective product and replaced it with the new, improved version at my own expense. It was painful, but it was the right decision. It was a learning experience, and I knew that customer trust was everything. The next year, I saw massive growth. I finally reached a point where I could step back from the day-to-day operations and focus on growing the business strategically. I hired a CEO to run the company, while I focused on big-picture goals. We expanded into new markets, launched new product lines, and invested heavily in branding. The company I had once run from my tiny apartment was now a full-fledged business with a team of 50 employees, and we were on track to make $10 million in revenue that year. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I almost gave up, so many times I doubted myself, but I kept going. I kept learning, kept improving, and kept pushing forward. And today, I'm not just the CEO of a successful business, but I'm also able to help others follow in my footsteps. I've created a mentorship program for aspiring entrepreneurs, where I teach them everything I've learned, from building an online store to scaling a business and managing a team. Starting a business wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. It took years of hard work, countless failures, and moments of doubt. But the rewards, the financial freedom, the personal growth, and the ability to help others have been worth every challenge. If there's one piece of advice I would give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't quit too soon. There will be hard days, days when you question everything. But if you stay persistent, keep learning, and don't give up, you can achieve things you never thought possible. The journey isn't easy, but the destination is worth it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.